Okay, Vic, go ahead. I got to play with the Periscope.
Okay. All right. Create your future self live. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for joining us. It is 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. You know what time it is. Go ahead and like, share, comment, invite your family, friends. I know everybody got some free time on your hands, so go ahead and tune in. So we got a great guest today. We're going to be talking about quite a few different things. This gentleman is a pastor, a preacher. He has his own congregation. He's also a dean at North Lake University out here, part of the Dallas County Community College system. But he's also got a great corporate background. So we're going to be talking a lot about Mr. Arthur James in a second. But first, just want to let you know, my name is Victor Johnson. My company is Nico Don Projects, where we heal your past and build your future. We help people improve their credit scores so that they too can invest in real estate or buy their first home or invest into their first business or a small business and try to get that funding. And then, of course, my co-hostess here, the co-hostess with the mostest, Miss Laquita Monley, representing that Bell County down there. What's happening?
What's going on, Vic? What's going on? Thank you guys so much. It is Monday. It is 6:04 p.m. Central Standard Time, and we are back to you guys with Create Your Future Self. I am your co-host, Laquita Monley, and I am the proud co-founder of Monley Innovations, a virtual call center company where we provide individuals positions as independent contracted agents answering inbound customer service call from the convenience of their own home. And Vic, as you all know, we are also real estate investors. My husband and I are the owners of M5 Real Estate Solutions, and we buy ugly houses. Yes,
nice.
We buy ugly houses, we flip them, we restore them, we keep them as rentals. You know, we have our hands in a few different pies when it comes to real estate investing. And you're right, we are here in the Bell County area, and I am a proud Army wife who my husband spent 24 years active duty Army, and we are here to provide our services to our military community.
Very nice. Well, it's always a pleasure to have you on. I was looking for you streaming this live so I can share it and start a watch party.
Okay, it is on my business page, so you should see me streaming right now. While you're saying that, I don't even see me streaming.
Right. We like to get this on first before we get to you, Arthur. We want to make sure the whole world sees what's happening.
So it's on there, Vic. I'm not sure if it's some delays. I didn't see it on my end, but when I clicked on my video, I did see it. So let's give us a few minutes so we can get in and start our watch parties. While we're trying to start our watch parties, I'd just like to thank everybody for joining us, our regular audience for joining us across Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope, and Twitter. Thank you guys so much for your faithful support each and every Monday. And today, I guarantee you the broadcast will be one that you don't want to miss. Pastor James is an amazing man of God. He's an amazing entrepreneur, and he's an amazing author. And I can't wait to hear more about his book and how he came through the process of writing that book, because once you hear about his book and you're a leader in any capacity, whether it's in ministry or whether it's in business, we have all experienced the pain in leadership. And the topic of this book was like, wow, it just really caught my eye. So I can't wait to hear more about that. I'm sharing this watch party across several groups that I'm in, both faith-based groups, as well as our Create Your Future Self live group. So you guys tune in to hear more about the importance of leadership and how to lead in times of crisis, and how to lead when you're in a personal position of pain.
Absolutely. So without further ado, author, preacher, pastor, dean, father, husband, Mr. Arthur James, ladies and gentlemen, please. Woo! Thank you for joining the show, sir.
Hey, it's my pleasure. I'm extremely excited to be here with you all. This was the highlight of my day today, and was so looking forward to it. And just so thankful for you all for giving me the opportunity to be here with you today.
No problem at all. Let's get right into it. So the name of your book is Preaching Through Pain: What Every Preacher in Person Needs to Know About Performing Under Pressure. You released that book in June 2018. So I got to know, what caused you to write this book?
Well, actually, I wrote this book just really as therapy for myself. I've been a bivocational pastor for over 23 years now. And at a season of my life, while preaching and parenting and being a pastor, just kept feeling like pain keeps showing up. But with pain keep showing up, nobody wants to hear what you go through. You just have to keep performing. And so a big part of the book, I talk about the stigma of being a pastor and having to go through a divorce. And when I did that, I started writing, as I said, for therapy for myself. And as I began to write, the more I began to consider the process that I use to continue to write. So I talk about in chapter 2, the breaking of a young preacher. When as a young preacher, giving my children a bath one night, getting ready on a Saturday night, get ready for my Sunday message as normal. Kids were 1 and 3 at the time, and my wife was gone. I get a knock on the door, and it's a stranger saying, "Are you Arthur James?" And I'm like, "Yes, how may I help you?" And he helped me more than I wanted, because he said, "You have been served." Oh. And because I had not been preparing for that, it shook me to my core. Wow. And one thing, I'm a pretty private person. I used to be anyway, private person. And even though we got divorced, in my opinion, at the time, we didn't have any major, I know in my end, didn't have any biblical grounds for getting a divorce. I worked hard, paid the bills, and just wanted to know why she couldn't be happy, but didn't think we would ever find ourselves in a divorce court. And so because of that, I didn't. And I also follow my own advice, particularly as you get married. And at this time, it was almost 8 years. I don't believe that you should share a lot of what's going on in your house with, family and friends. And so I just was thinking things were great. But to my surprise, when that hit me, I put the divorce papers in my briefcase, and Sunday morning had to preach. I was too ashamed or embarrassed to call my parents or my pastor. I was pastoring my own church at that time, but my pastor who launched me, I didn't know what to do. So I went to church with papers in my briefcase and began even more the journey of preaching through pain. Wow. God pulled me through. And from that, I had to be in court that Tuesday, by the way. Wow. And so having to get my mind together so that the people don't know what's going on in my life, but to still be a blessing to them while I'm dealing with pain myself. Wow. And so from that point on, the book took over 10 years to write. I finally got to the point and said, "Lord, I need to finish, because the longer I live, the more pain I experience." And so I want to put a bow on this one so we can get moving. But long story short, it became therapy. And as I began to go through the process of writing, chapter 2, I believe it is, actually 3, I believe it is feeling the hand of God. I just saw God bring me through to where I say to preachers and young preachers and pastors all the time, if your preaching doesn't work on yourself, don't dare pull it out on anyone else. Mm-hmm. And so I began, with the help of God, to pull myself together and preach through pain. And as a result of that, I wrote the book through chapters of my life. It's a combination of my life story, but also the framework that I used over 20 years of being a bivocational pastor, being extremely busy, but being able to produce and perform under pressure. And so the second half, or the end of the book, deals with the platform, if it were, that I used to preach. So it's the theory. It's from theory rather to application. And so preach is an acronym for my process of performing under pressure. The P stands for pray. Before I take any speaking engagement or before I do anything, prayer has to be essential. And then the R, no matter what's going on in your life, you have to remember your purpose. And so oftentimes particularly as we present or we share, preach, whatever the case might be, we're more concerned about ourselves. And when we do that, we tend to take the focus off of our audience and what we're there to deliver, what we're there to help with. And so as I begin to do that, that always helps keep me centered. And so it's not so much about how good are you going to do, but what value are you going to bring? Right. And purpose is right in line with that. Prayer, remembering your purpose. The E, P-R-E. The E is for expect problems. And so, like today, we got on this backstage early, but for some strange reason, my mic wasn't working on my first laptop. I bought a new laptop because we just went through some different, with all this going on for streaming purposes at the church, with Corona being out, and the new laptop wouldn't take the Chrome. And so I'm on my cell phone now because I expect problems. Every Sunday I preach, I have a fresh set of batteries somewhere close.
That's right.
Because I expect problems. They're gonna come. And if you're not expecting them, they will take you off of your game.
Yeah. And
so that's the E. The A is I won't stop right there. We'll get back into it, but I want somebody to understand that there's a process that God has used that has helped me, and I think it will help others as well. So that's what started with the book. Not just that, I talk about the pain of being a single parent, pastor at the time, and just the whole process of moving through life, but still having to deliver so that what you're called to do works out in your life and it blesses those that God sends you to.
Wow. Amen. Amen. That's amazing. You know, I love the transparency that you have there with going through the book and the pain in your process, and how, you know, it's a truth that as leaders in ministry and as leaders in the community, no one really truly takes the time to consider what type of pain we may be experiencing in our personal life. But at the same time, one of the characteristics of a true leader is being able to lead while you're in the midst of that pain, and not so much as not the fake it till you make it type of stuff, but really and truly being able to lead and rely on the Holy Ghost to give you the strength to do it. So that, you know, because it's at those times where the people would say, okay, if you look weak and it's getting you down, then what is it going to do to me? So how you were able to do that and continue to lead in such a way, that's pretty amazing. That's an amazing testimony. And then to be transparent in it through this book, that's truly a blessing. That's truly a blessing.
Absolutely. I guess my question for that is, because you said the next day you went to church and nobody was any the wiser that you got served, you know, the night before. How long did that go on before you finally opened up? I mean, obviously you did it in the book, but was there a period that you actually announced it to the congregation?
Yes.
Like how did that look like?
Yes. Interesting question. So I'm an optimist by heart. And so even after getting the papers and going through the pre-trial, the temporary orders, rather, I went back and said, hey, I can't find any biblical reasons why we should get a divorce. And even in all that, her thing was she wanted a fairy tale. And I'm like, I don't know what I can do with that. I know I work too hard. I'm a workaholic, but I'll try to stop going to church as much. No, not really. But my point being is finding that balance. But it came to the point to where when it became real, and after the temporary orders went into place, and I asked if there was, you know, you want to go back to counseling or anything to that effect, and the response was no. At that point in time, I had to, I believe, for the best, but I started to prepare for the worst at the time. And so what I did was I had to call my congregation together. Now, mind you, and I write about this in the book because I've always believed that I'm God's man. God loves me, and I know he loves me, and he's brought me through the process. But at the time, my wife was the only woman I'd ever been with sexually. I was a virgin when we met, and God kept me through playing football in college, and we married in college and young. But I set my congregation down and I said, you know, I want you all to know that I haven't cheated. My wife is the only woman I've still ever been with. I'm taking care of finances. I don't know why this is happening, but it's happening and I can't stop it. And if I understand that some have a challenge with a pastor being divorced, and so if you want me to step down as your pastor, I will. Now, mind you, I also talked to my covering, my pastor, Pastor Creighton, who's going on to be with the Lord, who raised me and reared me from the time I was born. And he said, you know, based on what I've shared with him, to keep preaching and keep doing what God has called me to do. But at the same token, I did sit the congregation down and I said, if you can ask me any questions about my life, any aspect of it tonight. Now, after tonight, I'm not gonna give you the carte blanche a backstage pass.
I heard that. Yeah.
And after that conversation, they were all in saying, Pastor, we're with you. We support you. We believe in the call God has for you. Let's move forward and keep going. Now, and I talk about this also in the book. Looking back now, some years later, I would have taken some time off and probably gone through, and I did at a certain different season of my life, my own personal time of counseling by myself. But I just preached through pain, man, and God brought through. Kids were little. Now they've grown and both are graduated college and working now. And I'm just telling you, God is faithful. If you stay faithful to him, he'll be faithful to you. But I had that happen. And honestly, the book is very interesting because I go from challenge to challenge and having to preach through pain and be transparent, because sometimes I had to learn the hard way. Bad things happen to good people.
Yeah.
But you're in control, not so much of what happens to you, but as we all know, your response. You're in charge as a person of faith of living and walking out what you believe and reading the scriptures for your lives and allowing it to apply. And that I know there's some things I don't know a lot. I'm not the smartest person in the room, but there are a few things I know. And one thing that I do know is God is faithful. Another thing that I do know is that there is nothing too hard for God to bring you through. And so that's where I come from a perspective of preaching where God brought me from, in addition to the knowledge of the scripture.
Very nice.
Amen. So what advice would you give to leaders and entrepreneurs during this time of uncertainty? We have a whole lot of things that are going on with COVID-19 that puts us in a place of uncertainty and a place of, I guess, transition. What advice would you give to leaders that are experiencing some of the things that you have experienced, whether it was through the experiences that you've written in your book or just, experiences in general, to be able to handle and lead during times like these?
One of the first things I would tell new leaders or leaders in general is that the first person that you lead is yourself. It's important to understand that there are things around us that are out of our control. And whether we are people of faith or not, we do have some things that we're in control of. We're in control of our attitude. We're in control of our discipline. We're in control of understanding that I always say that we never graduate in God, and we really don't graduate in life. We just keep going from one level to the next. And so I would say to get somewhere faster and further, find someone who's already gone there before you. I still today seek out mentors and glean from others to also try to develop myself. I would say as well, don't reinvent the wheel, even though God gives you creative ideas. Make sure that you have some, because there's some core basics tied to any vision or any new business that you're going to have. Things like finance, marketing, team development, human resources, those basics. So you may not be the expert in those areas, but surround yourself with people that are. And I would say take risk, but take calculated risk. The sooner, the better. I say this to my son all the time. So part of the reason we wanted you to graduate college with no debt, so that you can pursue what God has placed on your heart now. Before. And I love family. I love children, but it becomes challenging. The older you get, the more responsibilities you have. You can't just jump out, particularly if you're an entrepreneur. If it's you and you by yourself, as you all know, it's easy to maneuver. But if you've got a family and you've got responsibilities, you've got to be calculated and use wisdom in how you do those type of things. So I would say also understand that life happens in seasons and cycles. And so in as much as we're here facing something that none of us have ever faced before, there have been similar situations such as the swine flu and such as even Y2K, where there was paranoia and things on the forefront. We've prayed and God has delivered before, even long before now, back with depression and other things and other diseases that happen. We just seen God be faithful. And for me, everything goes with getting myself together first, because if you can't lead, it's going to be hard to direct others in crisis. And so the thing that one of my major professors when I was in college shared with us, is that he says you want to have the duck mentality. On the surface, everybody sees a duck gracefully glide down the water. down the river or the lake, but underneath that duck is just flapping just to stay alive. And so you never let them see you sweat. That doesn't mean that as a leader, as an entrepreneur, when you step out into risky and challenging ventures, it's going to be hard, but you got to make up in your mind that tough times don't last, but tough people do.
They sure do. Absolutely. Yeah. Man, that's powerful. So right now how are you conducting service? Is it virtual, or are people still coming in? Like, how are they doing it now?
So 2 weeks ago, we had live service and virtual for the first time. And then when they decreased the numbers of folks that can congregate to 10, we started this past Sunday with the praise team and myself and my wife. So nice. we just hit the number 10 to keep others out so that we could, but then we did Facebook Live, and also we're streaming from our website. Ran into a few technical difficulties because everybody was hitting the internet this time. Mm-hmm. However, we just believe that this is an opportunity for God to allow the church to be the church. And that's tied to the previous question. It's also important to understand that there are grand opportunities in any challenge. We just have to learn to look for them.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I was sharing with the church even on yesterday was the fact that oftentimes God wants us to prosper where we've been planted. Mm. And even though, like I was giving the example, an analogy of how when God begins to speak to Jeremiah in Jeremiah 29, we know the 11th verse, which says God knows the plans that he has for us, plans to prosper us and to give us an expected end. And that's true. But leading up to that, from 4 going into 7, and I'm not trying to preach, but it's in my blood. So just forgive me a little bit. He began to tell them that in as much as you're in captivity, you're going to stay there longer than you think. It's going to be 70 years. So don't believe the false prophets. He says, settle in, but basically don't stop living. Have children, get married, basically prosper where you are. There's going to come a better tomorrow. The thing that we have to understand is that we don't know when that tomorrow is going to come. Mm-hmm. And I say that we have to live until we're let go from this particular situation. We've got to continue to grow and allow ourselves to be creative where we are. There are some businesses that can be birthed during this time. Mm-hmm. Internet businesses, even the more so. Creative thinking that we should have been using prior to now is you're starting to see surface even the more because we have to. And so I would say to leaders in challenging times, it shows you who you are, because I know you all can relate to this as well. When things start to get so hard and so difficult, one of the ways that you know you're an entrepreneur and you know you're a leader and you know you're a manager, even when you have whispers and doubts from yourself and the enemy that come to your way, is that after certain times and after so long, there's something that rises up in a leader that says, okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this. We got to fight. Right. If I got to find another way. I was up here at 3 o'clock in the morning trying to figure out a new stream, but I figured it out at 3 o'clock in the morning because that's what leaders do.
That's what they do.
You know, if we got to find a way, we got to find a way. Failing is not an option.
Yeah.
And so I just say that as leaders, you have to be tenacious. You have to understand that it is important and imperative that you pull yourself together. One of the areas I'm working back on as well is even taking care of myself, my temple, because believe it or not, even the best of us, if we're not careful, we will let this situation, this pandemic situation cause us to be stressed. Again, it's new territory. There's fear of the unknown. But I share to believers, 2 Timothy 1:7, God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. I told someone the other day, matter of fact, the whole church, I said, don't be alarmed. I've been diagnosed. I said, you thinking you don't want to hug me for 6 months, but what I've been diagnosed with is PLS, power, love, and a sound mind. And so I have to keep practicing that every day. And it is contagious because as a leader, when you go through challenging times, people are going to look at us and how we respond. We've got to know, we've got to have confidence in who we are as entrepreneurs, people of God, and leaders, because our folks who work for us, they look to us and we've got to find ways to figure it out. But we're not left by ourselves. As people of faith, we look to God, who is our source. Psalms 121, he is a source of our strength. We look to him because he's the source for him where our strength comes from. Look to the heels from where our help comes from. So, yeah, that's right. I don't know if I answered your question, but
no, you definitely did. I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about. One, you mentioned the confidence factor. no one's going to be confident in you if you don't show confidence in yourself. So those leaders, entrepreneurs, whether you're in the ministry side or you real estate investor or making widgets, whatever it is, when you come across that unexpected or that, expect the problem to show up, you have to be willing to think outside the box and be tenacious, fight through it, be persistent. And so I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's a lot of people that are not, most of us, nobody is used to this situation right now, but there's more people that haven't been working from home this long extended period of time. Maybe they don't have a bunch of people at the house, or maybe they do. And it's like, oh my God, I didn't know this is what happens at 2 PM when my kids are running around, this and that. We all have to adjust and make those adaptations. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Thank you for dropping the verses on it, because we do need to be closer to God. If we weren't already, this is definitely the time to get your faith right. You know what I'm saying? So
yes, sir.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
This is
go ahead, LaQuita.
This is a prime opportunity. One of the things that I've been trying to make sure that I do Monday through Friday is hop on and do a live and just share some helpful tips and whatnot for people during this time of COVID-19 self-quarantine, because as you guys know, my business is work from home. And as a military spouse, PCSing all over the world, my life has been from home, raising children, homeschool mom, my husband's here, there, he's deployed, he's in the field, he's doing these different things, then finding different type of jobs that I can do from home, and then being with my children at home. So I found myself now being a resource for more than just my ages, but just for a community at large. Hey, how do I do this? And I look at the self-quarantine from COVID-19 as a time where families are being repositioned to be families back into God's divine order, even in terms of the kids now being at home. And now as parents, we're now put back in a position of being the number one influences in our children's lives, educationally, spiritually, just all around, to where we're being put in a position where we have to parent. Like that meme that went around social media for a while that says, I don't want to adult. Well, a lot of us took that real seriously. We didn't want to parent, and we forgot what the true definition. And I'm not knocking anybody's parenting style. Let me put that out there. My husband and I both work full time. We have 5 children. We understand what it means to have to parent. With his job, with his career in the military, and the things that we've had to do, we've had to learn how to parent in the circumstances that we've been placed in. But for me, COVID-19, the silver lining in this cloud is, if we stop focusing on the negative and start focusing on what we can do with this time. We've been blessed with time, something we can't get again. We can get money again, but we can't get back time. And we've been given this time during this time of crisis, COVID-19. It doesn't have to be a crisis. And, the things that Pastor has just said right there as leaders, especially if in the body of Christ, and we consider ourselves leaders, these are attributes that we should already be exhibiting, and we should now be set as those pillars in our community. So when our neighbors are looking at us and our response to COVID-19, the Christ that is in us should shine forth, and we have a ministry opportunity, ministry in our home, ministry in our neighborhoods, and all of that creativity that we have, those giftings, it should just come forth. How can we make our ministry grow and develop and get better? How can we advance the kingdom? I'm home now. So what's stopping me from ministering to my neighbor? What's stopping me from explaining certain things to my children from the perspective of the word of God? And I have all the time in the world now, just balancing it out and learning how to live and function the way that God intended for us to function. But that all goes back to leadership. If you're a parent, you're a leader.
Yeah.
You have to be able to lead right there in your home, whether you're a single parent or a 2-parent household, you're a leader. So how are we leading our children? What are we doing? How are we getting it together? And Pastor gave so many great examples of how we can do that. And that which we're doing in our home is easy to replicate in the workplace. We We have a comment over here on one of our watch parties. One of Sister Stephanie Legan, she says that, reminding people not to listen to the noise in the marketplace, but to look to the hope of glory. The noise is the noise, but we don't have to receive the negativity. We can view it from a different standpoint and turn it into something positive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So my question is, you founded a church. This is your church, the Transparent Church. You founded that in 2004, correct?
That's correct.
So there's other young men and women that are looking to probably start their own, church or some type of worship entity, whether it's a church or not. But what would you advise a young person or older person that's looking to now start their own ministry?
I would say first thing, make sure you have prayed and then go back and pray again. There's a difference between, and when I say that, I mean so that you can get clarity on your calling. Ministry is such, and particularly being a pastor, it is not just a vocation, it is a calling. And if you're not called to it, you will do it for the wrong reason. And when you do things for the wrong reason, you won't stay around when the tough times come, and they will.
Right.
Unlike, or I won't say unlike, but in similar fashion to how you've heard the stories of the restaurants being risky businesses, and, out of 10 that open up in a year, you have maybe 2 that are still there the next year. Churches have become risky because oftentimes, not that God won't sustain his church, but oftentimes, whether you're talking about a church or a business, anything as an entrepreneur, my prayer has always been, God, help me find your will and your why so that I'm following your call for my life and not my ambition. In a day and time in which we live, where we've got mega churches and, honestly, mega church pastors, many see them as celebrities, but people don't always know the story behind the glory. And so you think if you can just get, a place or, you've got a Bible and some suits that you can start a church. And it is a lot more than that.
I would
Trust
think so.
me. Because number one, you're dealing with people. And in as much as I love people, people come, like all of us do, with problems. And sometimes our people don't have the right motives when they come, particularly when you're starting out. I would say to a person who's starting a church, make sure, number one, you've prayed up and you're called to do it. But number two, in that, again, I go back to what I shared about being an entrepreneur or anything else as it relates to a business. Make sure you surround yourself with those that have gone before you. Before you plant, speak to a pastor who's done it, not just for a day, but for some years. Also, here's one of the keys that I think would definitely help anyone. You can be talented. There are a lot of talented preachers and a lot of talented people in the world, but many times they're not heard or they don't grow because it takes more than talent. It takes, if there was one thing I would have learned, I wish I would have learned young in my ministry and young in my life as a leader, it would be this. Talent is not enough. You have to have structure. And so it's not enough to even have a good word if you don't have structure, if you don't understand things like leadership, because it's one thing to preach. It's a whole nother thing to shepherd the people and to love on the people. And it's a whole nother thing to understand the business aspects of running a ministry.
Yes.
If God gives you a church or you start a church, you can't call the electric company or the landlord or the bank and say, thus I say, God says we should have this building for free. I mean, you can do it and he might move. But God is a God of principle more so than we think he is miracle. I like to say, I didn't coin the phrase, but I love it. The more we depend on principle, the less we have to depend on miracle. And so I would say understanding structure, business systems, very critical to growing a ministry or any business. I would also say have good character. I've been working on another book for years. I'm going to finish soon. But another book I've been working on called 10 C's. And one of the C's is character. You got to have character as a leader, particularly if you want folks to follow you. But there's another C that is I won't say even greater, but on par with having character, because I would go to the large conferences as a young preacher, and I would hear the bishops and the preachers say, God's not going to grow you until you get character, and you got to have character. And I would say, well, I got character. You know, I told you a little bit of my story. My testimony is not that God delivered me off of drugs. And if that's your testimony, that is great. I applaud you. My testimony is that not that, God didn't bring me from the poorhouse, even though we weren't rich. My testimony was that God was a keeper. And with that being said, though, I'm still yet working on character. So character is great, but it's not enough. Here's the thing that gets you to another level in God. I take one of my favorite Bible characters, Joseph, in Genesis 37. We're introduced to him. He has character, but not only does he have character, he has capacity, which is another C word that is huge. So his character got him in the room, but his capacity kept him in the room. We always quote the book of Proverbs, where in chapter 18, that a man's gift will make room for him. That's true. I like to say your gift will get you in the room, but your capacity will keep you there.
Yes, right.
And so it's important to understand what I mean by capacity is that your ability to withstand the various vicissitudes of life, the stresses and the strains, but also your excellence, because you can get something. And we oftentimes have messed folks up, we as preachers, because we tell you things like, God's going to give you the job that you're not qualified for. He will. But you got to get qualified once he opens the door.
That's right.
We always say, he's got land that, we didn't work for. He does. But even if he blesses you with the land, you got to have the capacity to know what to do with the land when you get the land.
Come on.
And so it's a combination between faith and also understanding wisdom and also understanding process. That's another word that I would share to any young leader, pastor. It's a process. I would say oftentimes that I thank God, not just for what he gave me, but for what he withheld from me at the wrong time. Because a blessing will not just build you, but a blessing can kill you if you're not ready for it. If you have not developed the capacity, it's like any building. The longest part, and I know you all know that, I know this rather, but the longest time on any building, house, you guys in real estate, is the foundation. And so what having God put you in his hand on a long foundation does is that it allows you to know who you are, because you will be tested. You will be tried by the enemy and others. And so you have to know who you are. I give an example. So capacity. So I start praying, yes, God, continue to work on my character. But while you're working on my character, increase my capacity. Because when God began to bless, and I'm married again, I told you a little bit of my story. I got a long story, but I told you a little bit about my story. It's in the book. But I went through a season of being single, saved, and satisfied, and God brought me a wife. And I got a bad wife. She is awesome. And always.
Nice.
But here's the thing. Had I not gone through what I'd gone through, had I not been prepared, because I was developing myself, because I knew God had called me to be a husband, even when I wasn't dating anybody. And so I began to prepare myself in private. Same thing with preaching. I would study. I began to create my own coordinates when I was in high school and college. Never knew I was going to preach, but just loved God. I didn't get into the scriptures to get a message. I got into the scriptures to get God. And so what I give the people is just overflow what's happening with me in private. And it just comes out in public. And here's the thing, but if you can't produce in private, you'll never really produce in public.
Right.
But that type of consistency and that type of commitment and that type of character and even capacity comes when you begin to ask God for. James 1 says around 8, if you have not, because you ask not. And even as it relates to wisdom, if anybody lacks it, all we got to do is ask of God. And so I began to pray, God, develop my character even the more, but also increase my capacity. Because this little bald-headed boy from Oak Cliff sits in boardrooms now and reports to the president of a college. I never saw any of that. Pastors of church, I never saw any of that. Writing a book, never saw any of that. But as I began to go on the journey, I realized that there is something to be said for not only character, but capacity, consistency, in addition to that. And here's another one, clarity. Vision. If I had time, I'm getting excited about this, if y'all don't know. But having vision and knowing what to do with it, and not just having vision. I talk about in the book as well, the pain of a vision. because it's one thing to have it, it's another thing to know what to do with it. And so when you have a vision, Dr. John Maxwell says this, the vision has to move from me to we. And so if I had learned that earlier in life, I would be even much further in life than I am now. And so that's one of the things that I do on a consistent basis each week as a part of our service of worship. We recite the mission and our vision because I want people to know two things, why we exist and where we believe God is taking us. But if you don't know the vision, that's clarity. Every leader needs that.
That's right.
Another one of those C's, you got to have it. Consistency is another one. If I die, they may say he never became a multi-billionaire or millionaire, but I believe they would say, if nothing else, Arthur James was consistent. He had character, he had clarity, and he began to allow God to allow him to have capacity. And so anyway, I can keep talking. I told you in my email, I love questions. I love doing this. I feel this is this is not work for me. Preaching is not work. When you do what you've been made to do, and ultimately you get paid to do, it's not work. It is true.
That's right.
So well, y'all cut me off anytime.
I already knew, man, because we've interacted now almost a year. I've known you, and just your energy, your inspiration, it lights me up when we talk. So I already knew if we could share this with more, that so many people would be touched and enlightened by that. Now we appreciate you sharing that. That's definitely those are the C's. That capacity is the one that's the big one. Even the bankers will tell you that you got to have some capacity because we'll help you get here, but you got to be able to maintain it. That's a big one. I love that you shared that. And everything that you think is a blessing may not be, especially if you're not preparing yourself for the journey that's ahead. So I appreciate you sharing that. Laquita, what you got?
So much. We're going to have to do this again. Like my head is
So this is what we need to do, Arthur. How can people get the book? I mean, that's number one thing. I want to definitely talk to people about how they can get a copy of the book. Again, it's called Preaching Through Pain, What Every Preacher in Person Needs to Know About Performing Under Pressure. How can they get a copy of that book, Pastor James?
So I've got the book right here. They can get a copy. They can go to Amazon, of course, get a copy. Any of the online bookstores, they can get a copy, or they can go to my site direct, and I've got a free audio book for them. We did the audio book in 2019, not 2000, but 2019. Did that. I actually am doing the narration of the audio book, and there's also a special feature in this book that I call preaching moments. So in every chapter, I actually stop just writing and I start literally preaching. And that's also captured in the audio book.
Okay.
It'll bless you. I promise it will. But I wanted to give this away free. So if you go to my website at arthurjjames.com, you will see a link to Amazon there as well. But you will also, if you just type in your information, just your name and email address, I'll send you the free download for the audio book as well. But you can also go to our publisher, Trilogy Publishing, published this first book for me. They are owned by TBN. They're fairly new now, 2 years in the game. They're owned, again, Trilogy is owned by TBN, but Trilogy matter of fact, let me look on the book, trilogy.net, I believe it is. But if you go to arthurjjames.com, Amazon, I believe it's on Barnes and Nobles as well. You can find it out there and it'll bless you.
Nice. Yeah, man. Definitely. Please, if you're in the Dallas area, come on out. I need to still get out there, man. What we talking about once we get past this coronavirus stuff, but we need to get people out to the Transparent Church.
Yeah. How can people get your online service? How can they see what you're streaming?
They can go to the church website at www.thetransparentchurch.org. That's THE, transparent as it sounds, in church.org. Or they can go to the Transparent Church Facebook page, and the post are there as well. Or you can go to my YouTube channel. You can just go to, actually, if you go to the website, the social media channels are there at the bottom as well. We also have an app, the Transparent Church app. You can download that for free as well. But any of those mediums you can find us. We're on Instagram as well, Twitter, as well as Facebook and LinkedIn.
thetransparentchurch.org.
So, yes, sir.
The show is called Create Your Future Self Live. Mm-hmm. So what does your future self look like, Pastor James, or whether it's for you or for your congregation? What does the future look like?
The future for me looks like me doing even more ministry. It looks like me at this age and season of my life, I'm still young, but I'm knocking 50 on the door in a couple more years. Yes, sir. I'm starting to have more salt than I am pepper in my beard.
The grades are winning.
Yes, sir.
I know.
Yeah. But for me, it's about raising up the next level of leaders. Yeah. One of the things that I love the Bible, but there's a passage from a leadership perspective that really gave me more respect for Moses than ever before. I want to say it's Deuteronomy 38. Don't quote me on it. It's in there. I can find it for you. But when he realized, and I talk about this in the book as well, on the pain of a vision, where God begins to bring him one last time to see the land of promise, Canaan. And he says to him there, Moses, I want you to look at it. This was after he struck the rock. This was after he disobeyed God. And God said, because you didn't believe me by faith, I want you to see what you're not going to step into. And so I talk about in the book, seizing the vision and not just seeing the vision. But Moses could see it, but he couldn't seize it because he walked in disobedience. But God showed him. And I was like, God, you are so unfair. Why would you show this man this right before he's getting ready to die of what he could have had, but didn't get? I think part of the reason was that it was going to encourage people like me to read, to say, finish strong. And so I have a saying, don't strike the rock, no matter how tough times get, no matter how much people get on your nerves, don't strike the rock. But here's where Moses, he began to encourage me, because as a leader, he realized that he's not going to make it in. God used him to deliver the people out of Egypt and bondage. But he had such a heart for the people. He says, God, here's what I want you to do. I know I'm not going to make it. I know I blew it. I know I didn't get to do what I thought I was going to get to do. But don't leave the people as sheep without a shepherd. Would you raise up a leader to take them in? And it was at that juncture that God said Joshua would be the one. And so I say that to say this. He got to the place in his leadership where he understood that he has done a good portion of the journey in his life, but he wasn't selfish to hang on and say, I'm not going to help anyone else. I'm not going to think about the next generation. He was considering the people. And so at this stage of my life, even though I believe I've got a lot of life left and I'm going to work smarter and not harder, even though I love to work hard, I'm looking for younger leaders. I pastor, not a lot, but a handful of select young pastors and young leaders who I give access to, that I encourage. I generally call them each week after service on my way home just to see how things went. What are you doing? How's the family? To give direction where needed, that type of thing. And so leaders, developing leaders is what I want my legacy to be about. And also trying to shape, even in my own family, my children, to be more of a resource to them. It was, a challenging process, as I shared part of my story, preaching through pain and being in their lives. Even though I was a divorced father, I never divorced my children. That's another message. It's also in the book for single parents, particularly fathers. Just because you and the mother don't make it, rather, that doesn't mean you divorce your children. And so I had to fight like hard to spend half time and more time with my children. And now I love the relationship that we have, even though we're still getting better and growing in it. But I said all that to say it's about who's next and who I can help as I continue to stretch myself to do even more things from a technological standpoint with our ministry, as well as writing more books, speaking more, and surrounding myself with people like you. I also talk about in the book the difference between energy dealers and energy drainers, because they impact where you go and how you grow. And I love being around energy dealers like yourself.
We appreciate that, man. Appreciate it. That
was a good setup for my question.
Okay.
What are the important decisions that we make as leaders of our organization that will have the biggest impact?
That's a great question. Not that the other ones weren't. I think for me, one of the greatest decisions that I make on a daily basis or in general, I talked a little bit about it, and it's making sure that you are the CEO, as Herman Cain wrote in his book, CEO of Self, that you're bringing your full self to the table every day, because oftentimes we don't know our words have weight when we're in positions of authority.
Yeah.
And so you can't just flippantly say things to people, even in a joking way, to people who work for you and who work with you, and even to your children. And so I would say the decisions coming to the table on a daily basis, knowing that as a leader, one of your primary responsibilities is to set the culture of your organization. If there's a problem in the organization, there's a problem with leadership. If there's a problem in the church, there's a problem with leadership. If there's a problem in the family, there's a problem with leadership. And sometimes I have to confess, Lord, I'm the problem, but I'm not going to stay the problem. I've got to be big enough to understand that I have to keep equipping myself. And so one of the things tied to that as a leader, you must add value to yourself in order to add value to others. I learned that great lesson from, again, one of my mentors from afar, Dr. John C. Maxwell. And of course, what I learned and the principles in the Bible. And so I challenge myself daily to do better, to be better, to lead, because I know people are watching. And not only people are watching, God is watching. Colossians 3:17, I try every day to do my work as unto the Lord. And so you've got to bring yourself to the table. You've got to understand the ramifications of your decisions. And here's one that's very critical, whether you're in a large, especially if you're in a larger organization. But oftentimes we fail, and even a smaller one, but to realize that there are unintended consequences to decisions. And so you have to understand that every decision has a financial ramification to it in some respects. Even if it's not money, it's your time. And so the other side to that, decisions on how to best utilize my time, realizing that I don't have to be at every meeting. I'm still getting better on this myself, managing my time, because people say all the time to me, one of the things I hear a lot is that, James, you're busy, as if that's a badge. And my thing is, my response is, I don't want to be busy. I want to be effective. And so I would say, understand that more that you add value to yourself, having your own professional development plan, don't put that in the hands of your supervisor or your president or your pastor or anyone. It's your responsibility so that you can grow, so that you can be able to be the best, read up on your industry, know what's happening in your markets, so that you can be a resource. Because if you're a resource, that's what got, again, Joseph a job. Joseph went from the pen to the palace the same day, because when God gave him an opportunity, he did like Churchill said. He said, I shall prepare, and perhaps my time will come. And one day he shaved himself, because I believe he figured, changed his clothes, I'm not coming back here. So when he got before Pharaoh, he not only interpreted the dream, but he added value to him to tell him that here's what you need to do. Save up some grain in the good times so that when you have tight times, you're going to be okay. And he said, where can I find such a man? He says, you know what? You've been so cold in your consideration and your comments. I'm just going to hire you. And just like that, he was the prime minister of Egypt. And so I digress from that challenge, not the challenge, but digress from that comment just to share that, because it's important that we have to be the people who are resource providers for our people, and also setting the culture for your organization. It's also tied to service. I have a large background in service as well. And so you can't be the one, even if you don't like things that are going on in your organization, in your company, either change them or be quiet about it. If you got to make a decision, if you don't agree with the leadership and you're on the team, have those discussions in private and not in public. I don't know why, you don't want to be the one saying, I don't know why they're making all these changes. No, you have to set the culture. Do your best. I tell them at the church all the time, I'm not too big. If I see a piece of paper on the ground, I'm going to be the first one picking it up, because I want to set the tone of excellence. I want to set the tone, and how I treat people, how I talk to others is going to be critical to the culture that we set. And that's one of the things people often say about our church, is that it's a very welcoming and loving environment, because they can feel it. And I said that doesn't happen by accident. It happens on intention.
That's right. That's right, man. I love it, man. I love your energy, your intellect, your wisdom, your willingness to share. We definitely appreciate you, coming on and sharing that wisdom. I really hope people will reach out, get a copy of the book. I'm interested in hearing the rest of the story myself, to hear what else is going on, Mr. James. And also, we got to get out for some golf whenever things open back up again, man.
I'm ready for some golf. And if you don't buy the book, if you don't do anything else, I would just challenge you to go to the website, arthurjjames.com. I also have a free excerpt of chapter 7. It was one of my favorite chapters. It's called Dancing with the Right Girl. It'll bless you too, especially fellas and the ladies as well.
I like that. Very good. This is good stuff. So we got the site, arthurjjames.com. They can also go to the church and get a stream at thetransparentchurch.org. Anything else you want to share with us before we wrap it up?
I would just say in this time of uncertainty, hold on to what we know for sure. The facts may be that there are a lot of folks infected with the coronavirus. There are thousands of folks, and we're trying to really adhere to what our leaders at the county and the national level are saying to us to make sure that folks are safe. But we know Psalms 91, that he that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. We know we don't walk in fear, we walk in faith, but that, however, that does not mean that we don't walk in wisdom. I would say have hope in what looks like hopeless times, because we're still here, we're still alive, God's still on the throne, he has not moved. We shall get through this. It may not be as quick as we think, but sooner rather than later, God's going to show up. And while we have some time, don't use this downtime as wasted time. Do more than just stream videos and eat and gain weight. It's a great time if you got to do push-ups and stretch, work out at home. It's a great time to work on those vision and those goals that you have at the beginning of the year. Hopefully, it's a great time to strategize while things are tight, because things will change and you want to be on the cutting edge and on the curve before the change comes, because God has given. Let me just share it like this. We have been built and born and birthed for such a time as this. I was thinking the other day, there has never been a time like this in the history of the world where the whole world is dealing with the same thing, to my knowledge, in this capacity. And so I said, God, I thank you that you trusted us enough to be able, as leaders and as people of faith and as pastors and as business owners, to be able to have the kind of faith in us to believe that with you, we'll make it through this. And so I say, this is not the time to walk in doubt, and this is not the time to be down, even though we have to be mature enough to know that we have to take responsibility and watch our hygiene practices and the like. But this is also a time to pray and believe that God will change some things. And the most that he can do is to change our mind and our attitudes. It's a great day to be alive. Don't forget it. Absolutely. And continue to walk and work after the goal and the visions that God has given you. For the vision, Habakkuk says too, is for an appointed time. At the end, it's going to speak and you don't have to say nothing.
Come on now.
Yeah. There's no better way to wrap the show up than that. I mean, people, please share this episode, this broadcast of Create Your Future Self Live. We always try to bring you valuable, great content, great energy. Today we brought it. We definitely thank you, Pastor James, for coming on. This has just been a blessing, especially during these uncertain times, man. It's good to hear from a ray of light, and I just really appreciate you coming on today.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank y'all so much for having me. I value our friendship. So good to meet you, Lady Laquita. If there's anything I can do for you guys, please reach out. Don't hesitate. Let me know. God bless you.
God bless you.
Appreciate that
so much. Thank you for everyone that has joined us across Facebook, YouTube, Pinterest, Instagram. We've had numerous likes and we've had numerous shares and follows from our various watch parties. Again, thank you guys so much, and tune in. We'll be back with you next week at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. We have another amazing guest that's going to come on and to give us tidbits of wisdom to help us to create our future self. You know, as Pastor said, in these times of uncertainty, this is the time where we can utilize this time for self-improvement. We can utilize this time to grow as entrepreneurs, as business owners. We can use this time to grow together as family. We can use this time to grow spiritually in our walk with God. Don't waste it. Time is a resource that we can't get back. Make the most of it and use this time to create your future self. Until next week, this is Vic and Laquita, and we thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you guys again on next week. Take care. God bless.